Hi everyone, I'm joined today by my friend John Wight, who's a great journalist and political commentator. John, thanks very much for joining me.
I'm tremendously delighted to be with you again, Gordon. It's been too long.
It has. I don't do this very often for the reasons that I was talking to you about off camera, and I think it's really important right now that people document this period of time because it's critical that we do that properly and don't let the powers that be steal the narrative.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yes, this is probably the most major point, major inflection in human affairs that I've lived through. And I don't say that lightly because we've been through so many in the last couple of decades, going back to, well, 3 decades, going back to the Iraq War, which I think was the starting point of the crisis that has been perennial since then. The lack of accountability when it came to the authors of this disaster, Tony Blair in our country, Alistair Campbell, Sir Richard Dearlove, who was head of the MI6, who concocted this dodgy dossier, as it's now become known, led to the disaster of Libya under the auspices of David Cameron, and now Britain's role in the proxy war in Syria, Ukraine, and now the Gaza genocide. So incredibly, to me, and I think to you as a moral person, we have now been borne witness or forced to bear witness to a genocide in our time on live stream. And the disconnect between the humanity of the masses in terms, which has been manifested in the size of the demonstrations in solidarity with the Palestinian people all over the world, and the leaders who have ridden shotgun for this horrific moment in our time and of all time has never been more stark. So I think it's infected and it's informed our politics. There is a sense, I think, that nothing will ever be the same and nothing should ever be the same. But unfortunately, in our country in particular, in our society, it seems to be the right, the ideological right, that is making all the headway politically. And when it comes to capturing the attention of the hearts and minds of the masses, I don't know what you think, but that's where I am.
I think they've got a lot. They're having a lot of help in doing that. I think
Yes,
our
yes,
media is propping them up. I think back to the last election. George Galloway was a sitting MP at the time, and I think
yeah,
the
yeah,
Workers' Party had several local councillors at the
yeah.
time, and Reform, I don't think had any. Up
Uh,
until that point, Nigel Farage had lost every.
well,
Uh,
he's a media darling.
yeah,
There is certainly an agenda at work here. And I go back, I'm a great believer in history being a guide or a warning rather than a guide, should I say. In the 1930s, we had Oswald Mosley,
yeah.
who was a media darling. Beaverbrook, the hooray for the black shirts, that infamous Daily Mail headline in the 30s, because the real threat to the ruling class, when all is said and done, comes from the left, not the right. Because we advocate a politics that redistributes wealth, that taxes the rich, that puts the working class in power. The right doesn't do that. It uses the working class in order to save capitalism from itself. And this is what we're seeing right now with, as I say, the airtime and the way that Nigel Farage has been created as kind of man of the people, and obviously on a much cruder sense, Tommy Robinson now. Elon Musk is Tommy Robinson's biggest supporter. And Elon Musk, this billionaire, white South African, owns the biggest social media platform in existence. Very scary times in many regards.
It's clear it's being orchestrated to me. It's clear that it's being propped up and that it's being exaggerated. I don't think the majority of people in this country are racist,
No,
and that's essentially the fears that these people are preying upon in people to
yeah,
try and move towards a more
yeah,
far right
Richard,
populist angle.
yes,
And it's clear that the people doing it have got an agenda.
100%. And it's a distraction from the reality. It's to attempt to keep mystification, the veil of obfuscation over the reality of our lived experience, which is as you just walk out your door in any town or city, you see the reality. It doesn't meet the narrative, i.e., the argument that this is the best of all possible worlds is belied by the fact that we have mass immigration. We have, and I said it in a post recently, Gordon. The problem is not mass immigration. The problem is mass capitalism,
Yeah.
of which mass immigration is a symptom, not cause. And we have to get to grips with this monster, this beast in our midst, which dictates and mandates that certain people live in heaven and certain people live in hell. This is a dystopia in all but name it. I feel like we're living through the pages of a dystopian novel. You walk outside your door, as I say, and you see homelessness, you see poverty, you see people struggling to make ends meet, you see the rising tide of drug addiction, substance abuse, you see the rising crime rate. You contemplate a society in which nothing seems to make sense anymore. Crumbling infrastructure, the worst rail system in the Western world by far. And again, this is presented to us as the best of all possible worlds. And migrants have become scapegoats for all the ills of capitalism in 2025. And I think it's a terrible thing because it breeds and curates and sows false consciousness at a time when consciousness, class consciousness, has never been more necessary.
This country is built on immigration.
100%.
It's pretty much the only thing I would say right now that makes Great Britain great
100%.
is the people in it. And they are from all corners of the world.
Yes.
They are from all colours, all creeds, all nationalities, all religions.
Yeah.
And there's a great video, isn't there, of a guy who's asked what is it like to be British, and he said being British is driving to work in a German car, to work for a Swedish furniture company before going to an Irish themed pub to drink Belgian beer and go home and have a Chinese and an Indian at the same time of being suspicious of everything foreign. And the immigrants that are coming in now are just the latest in the line of those immigrants. We had it with the Irish, we had it with the Chinese, the
Jewish,
Windrush generation.
Caribbeans. And here's the thing, mate. The thing that's lost when the word immigration and asylum seeker, these are human beings.
Yeah.
Of flesh and blood. They're doing exactly what we would do in their position. And here is where things get funky from my perspective. I lived 7 years as a so-called illegal migrant in America. I was working, I was paying tax. I was able to thrive. But the difference is I had white skin. And that's currency. And we have to get to grips with the racism, not of the people of the UK, but of our ruling class. Our ruling class is racist to its core when all is said and done. They are the ones that are sowing this racist narrative that it's a black and white thing, that Muslims are a threat to everything that makes Britain great. And you're right. They've enriched us culturally, intellectually, in so many different ways. They are our neighbours. They're our brothers and sisters.
I've got a Muslim couple living above me in my block of flats. I've got a lesbian from Ireland living next door. I've got black people. I've got Chinese. I've got Poles. I've got all sorts of neighbours, and there's flags all over the place. Now I live on a council estate, just a normal council estate in the West Midlands, John. And I tell you this, the last white person who said the N-word on this estate got knocked out by another white guy.
Brilliant.
We're not racist. We're just not. We all live together. We are what makes Britain great. Immigration is what makes it great.
Diversity. And I don't use that word. I hate the word woke because that's part of the vocabulary of
the language that's been stolen. That is, isn't it?
But yeah, me living in America was a wonderful education from a guy from an Edinburgh housing scheme who'd only known everything being white. Culture, the narrative, vocabulary, everything, your cultural references. And I was at socialist meetings with people from Mexico, from Korea, African Americans, Irish, every creed in the context of the war in Iraq. And that is the world that they fear. Because that's the world that's the world of the people, not of capital, not of the markets, not of the corporations. That is a world and it's wonderful tartan, being Scottish, that understands that we're connected by bonds of mutuality that transcend our accidental birth when it comes to our racial background or culture, etc., etc. And that's a world that I advocate for, and it's a world I'll never advocate for. And these young men coming over on these boats are the best of us. The courage it takes to get on one of those dinghies, the desperation that motivates them to do so is inordinate, and is of a piece with heroism, I would put it. And I'm tired of being made to believe that the protesters outside these hotels represent British values, because as you've just unpacked so eloquently, they don't. They don't represent British values. They represent anti-British values in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, for the people who are, trying to weaponize the flag these days, as if anybody on my council estate is going to be offended by the British flag going up. They put it outside themselves. There's British flags all around this estate. There is on most council estates in the UK. We are patriotic as a people, and we are a multi racial people. We just are. But these people who are trying to weaponize it at the moment, and people saying get out of our country and that sort of thing. I'm like, what is it that you're proud of in Britain? What does make you proud to be British?
Well, let
Is it the
me.
way that we're facilitating a genocide and fascism right now? Is that what makes you proud? Because for me, 1939 was when Britain was truly great, when it stood up against fascism, and now we seem to
Well,
be facilitating it.
well, before that, I wrote an article. I'll share it with you, but I'll unpack it quickly for your viewers. The men and the women of the international brigades who went to Spain to fight Franco, most of them hardly had a penny to their name. Thousands went from the UK to fight that fight. That was a moral crusade of its time. Prior to that, the moral crusade of its time, on the basis of an international cause, was the abolition of slavery in the
Hmm.
southern states of America. And there were functioning anti-slavery societies the length and breadth of these islands, Gordon. And the role of Manchester textile workers in particular, people need to know this history, because Manchester was, the textile industry in Britain was the biggest in the world in the mid 19th century. And it relied on cheap cotton from the southern states, the slave states of the south.
Right.
As part of the Union war effort, they had instituted and established a naval blockade of the Atlantic ports of the southern states so they couldn't get their cotton out, which was their main commodity. And the textile owners in the UK, they impressed upon the British government, led by Lord Palmerston at the time, to use the Royal Navy to smash the blockade so they could get the cotton back and keep the profits flowing. The workers in Manchester held meetings, and they resolved that they would not touch one bale of southern cotton in solidarity with the slaves. Can you imagine? Even though it was going to mean that they were going to suffer privation.
Yeah, this is the
And
19th century.
such a significant statement and action was this, that Abraham Lincoln sent them an open letter thanking them for the act of, as he described it at the time, an act of sublime Christian heroism. Obviously, it was a man of his time. So we've been here before. So now we get on to Gaza. Gaza is the moral crusade of our time, Daniel. It is our anti-abolition movement. It is our Spain in the 1930s, Franco versus the Spanish Republic. And the metric of our humanity today, and I hope this doesn't sound overly hyperbolic, is where you stand on Gaza. That's a metric of your humanity. Nothing else matters, really, in my view.
You wrote a great article on this, and I'm just going to, with your permission, I'm just going to read the top bit of it, because it really does encapsulate um, the situation right now. You should be able to see, you can see that, right?
Right.
So the Palestinian resistance in Gaza represents humanity in our time. This is on Medium. I've always loved the way you beat around the bush, John. The Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, is an army made up of ill-trained racist cowards. Not one of them is worth one hair on the head of the poorest member of the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. Not one. Young Palestinian men in sandals with small arms and brave hearts are currently writing a page in the annals of human history, one that will resonate for generations to come. Songs will be sung and poems written about these men, the sons of refugees who have only ever known occupation and structural oppression in the name of white European ethno-supremacist and now genocidal project. Not since the 300 Spartans at the gates of Thermopylae, not since the 1916 Easter Rising in Dublin, not since the immense courage of those men and women of the Jewish fighting underground in the Warsaw Ghetto, not since any of the above has there been such an imbalance of military power on one side and an imbalance of human courage and fidelity on the other. That's just great, and it really does encapsulate exactly what you're talking about here. We are talking about men in sandals with rocks and kites
Yes.
against a nuclear power who has the largest military superpower the world has ever seen in its back pocket.
Yes.
This is what real resistance is like. And I wrote a piece yesterday and talked about what you wrote there, and just mentioned, the Palestinian resistance is our resistance.
Yes.
In a sense, we're occupied just the same as the Palestinians are with the Israeli. The Israelis are influencing our politics and
Yes.
our foreign policy in this country.
100%. I think people have to grasp the nettle when it comes to the extent of Zionist infiltration into our politics at the highest level. Every single Labour politician of any seniority is bought and paid for. Same with the Conservatives. They have engineered our media narrative when it comes to the depiction of this event with its framing. Even still today, after over 2 years of this genocidal slaughter, when you see Palestinian spokespeople or representatives of Palestinians on our media, they're interrogated,
Mhm.
whereas representatives of Israelis are interviewed. And some of it is subtle, some of it is crude. And I pray and aid in this regard. Piers Morgan, his very popular uncensored YouTube show is proof positive. Even though he has sat through this and he's had so many such eloquent speakers speaking from the depths of despair and desperation to try and humanize the Palestinian people, he still, in the last analysis, holds to a position that the Israelis are defending themselves. And this is where we have to understand the reality of the world we're living in, Gordon, which you do, but I'm speaking figuratively here. Ours is a world not underpinned by international law. It's not a world underpinned by democracy. It's underpinned by a hierarchy of human worth, the internalization of white supremacist tropes. And in this hierarchy, the westernized Israeli Jews belong at the top beside us. And Palestinian Arabs, Arabs in general, brown and black people in general, belong near the bottom. Therefore, their lives are less important. And therefore, the normalization of their extermination, their slaughter, their murder is part and parcel of what it means to be Western. So I find it unconscionable, even a man of my, I like to think, broad experience in life and in politics, that we can watch Palestinian bairns, to use a Scottish word, kids, children, babies, being slaughtered one after the other. And there's no talk whatsoever of any military intervention, as there should be, as there should have been a long time ago. And yet, if an Arab leader like Saddam Hussein coughs, NATO is deployed. Slobodan Milosevic, the last leader of Yugoslavia, his country was invaded in the late 1990s for a fraction of the atrocities committed vis-a-vis what's going on in Gaza today by the state of Israel. Why is this? I put it to you that residual guilt over the Holocaust, that this is that the Zionist movement has arrogated to itself the sense of impunity and innocence, that it can do no wrong. And this is partly revenge, I would say, on a deeper level for that Holocaust. And the Palestinians have been made responsible for a Holocaust that they had absolutely no part in. And this is the fine point of the injustice of it.
And it's, I watched an incident on live TV, as you probably did last week. It's horrific that they're getting away with this, and it's not that just there's no humanitarian or military effort at all that you mentioned there, but there's nothing at all being
No,
done with regards to sanction
no,
whatsoever.
no.
I watched live on TV over 20 people be hit in a double tap strike on a hospital. I
I saw
mean,
it. I saw it.
this
Unbelievable.
this is war crimes on top of war crimes on top of war crimes, live streamed. So that's a hit on a hospital that killed a doctor and medics, and then a double tap which is so that's a hit on a hospital, that's a war crime.
Yeah,
Kill doctors and medics, that's another war crime. Kill defense workers, that's another war crime. Kill journalists, it's a war crime. In a double tap, there's 6, 7 war crimes there on live TV, and this government did nothing,
yeah.
not a thing.
And here's the grim irony of the situation, Gordon. The state of Israel today is the only state in existence today of which Adolf Hitler would have approved. Can you dig it?
Yeah, I can, and I have
It's an
situation.
ethno-supremacist nightmare. It's an ethno-supremacist beast. It's a failed project in ethno-supremacy, and in this regard, it belongs in the same spectrum as the US Confederacy, Nazi Germany, White Rhodesia, the attempt to establish a loyalist ascendancy in the north of Ireland, and apartheid South Africa. And why have every one of those states or projects failed? Because they involve the oppression of an indigenous people. And as you know, Gordon, oppression breeds resistance. And here's where we get to October 7th. That was not an act of terrorism. That was an act of desperate and audacious resistance in the teeth of decades of structural oppression. Was it ugly? Yes, of course it was. But no ugly oppression has ever given rise to a pretty resistance. And this is where the apologists for and these ideologues of ethno supremacy and racial hierarchy, which I mentioned earlier, get it wrong about the human condition. If you oppress someone, they have two choices. They can break or it can make them. And those young men who took part on October 7th, probably all of them are dead now, but they've been replaced. And they will be replaced and will be replaced. These are the best of us. They stood up and said, I will not accept being made to feel less than. My dignity, my honor is such that I will fight, even though I know I'm fighting a losing battle. But they're not losing the war. Same with the men and women of the Jewish fighting underground in 1943 in the Warsaw Ghetto. That comparison is one that we need to make, because that's the one that makes the bastards that rule over us uncomfortable. That oppression creates bonds of human solidarity that transcend race, religion, or any other false division there may be. So the men and the women of the Jewish fighting underground, they're part of our tradition. Ours are resistance fighters in Gaza. And that's the argument I continue to make. And that's the argument we should all continue to make.
Well, international law is on your side, John, because the right to armed resistance for an occupied people is steeped in international law. In fact, I think it was voted on unanimously in one of the United Nations conventions in the 80s or 90s, either 82 or 92, that, this is a resistance to an occupation, an illegal military occupation that is occupying, that is operating a system of a racist apartheid. I had a conversation with one of my friends a few weeks ago and a few months ago, and I was talking a lot about fascism at the time. And my friend just said to me, Gordon, you should not maybe talk about it so much because it puts people off, puts a wall up. And I went, okay. But I've had to think about it since. And what else do you call it? if it's plainly fascism.
If it walks like a duck, if it squawks like a duck. I mean, we are living in a fascist reality, maybe pre-fascist. Well, when you're arresting people for wearing a certain T-shirt on the streets of the UK, but you're not arresting Israeli officials when they come over to visit after they've been accused of genocide by the ICJ. What else do you call that? What else do you call that? We're arresting old age pensioners. We're arresting people in wheelchairs for wearing a Palestine Action T-shirt. Wearing a T-shirt that says, "I oppose genocide. I support Palestine Action." People are being raided in their homes at 1 o'clock in the morning for stuff they put on Facebook or on X, or as Twitter used to be called, with the same message. What else is that? How else do you describe that?
How can you call?
There's a quote that's attributed to Dostoevsky, though some people contest whether it was him, but the quote stands: "The best way to stop a prisoner from escaping is to make sure that he never knows that he's in prison." You feel me?
I feel you real.
This is where we're living now. We're in a prison.
We really are.
As long as you're watching, as long as you're satisfied, as long as you keep your activities to watching Netflix, shopping, and going along to get along, you'll be fine. You think you're living in freedom. But as soon as you bump up against the parameters of that so-called freedom, that's when you realise that you're living in unfreedom, masquerading as freedom.
I mentioned that the last time I think Great Britain was truly great was in 1939, and I feel as if we are in that period right now of the 30s that you mentioned, where we're in the Harold Macmillan appeasing fascism stage.
Yeah.
There's no appeasing fascism. Do you know why, John? Because they're fascists.
There you go.
You can't appease them. They're fascists. And if you look at what Israel's doing with the full backing of the United States, whether they're going along with it because they're being blackmailed or not, but they're backing them. It's clearly fascism. This is a white supremacist ethno state that is systematically murdering people who they believe are subhuman to them. And
Yes.
they clearly have intentions on expansion. They don't even define their borders. Their borders expand every day. It's clear that they want large parts of that area, and right now we're appeasing it.
It's also satanic. I've hesitated to go into this level in terms of my own framing of this. But when Netanyahu, if you recall at the outset, he referenced the Bible, Deuteronomy, and he said, "Don't forget what Amalek did to you."
Amalek, yeah.
That's a mythical story. That was him signaling to his own people and to the world entire that this was going to be a war of extermination. So this has a biblical component to it, aspect to it, satanic. And I think that Zionism is an Nazism of our time. And do you know, I didn't know that even those until recently, the UN in the mid-70s decreed that Zionism was a racist ideology.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
And it was only taken off the UN's books in 2000 as part of the Oslo Agreements, 1999.
Okay.
There you go. So the world at one point knew what they were dealing with this beast, this Zionist ideology that is anti-human, it's genocidal, it's colonial, it's barbaric. In Israel, I will argue till I'm blue in the face and beyond, is a white European settler colonial project. The wrong conclusions were drawn from the Holocaust, Daniel, in the name of Zionism. Obviously, Zionism predates the Holocaust, but the Holocaust was the impetus that ended with the establishment of Israel, which was established on acts of terrorism, Irgun, the Stern Gang, Haganah, etc., the mass displacement and dispossession of the indigenous population of Palestine. I think that we have to push back against all the historical religious obscurantism that's prayed in aid to justify Israel. This is really a matter of where you stand when it comes to the oppressed versus the oppressor. Simple as that.
Which really brings Zionism front and center, and I know that's a really hot topic at the moment with a lot of people who, well, I agree with on a lot of things. People who I would suggest are allies of mine are having a bit of an argument about it. The Your Party is obviously
Yeah,
getting a lot of headlines, and Jeremy's getting a lot of grief because he won't come out and say he's an anti-Zionist. And I kind of I've been thinking about this a lot, and I didn't want to put anything out there because I didn't want to join in the argument, and be part of the problem. I feel like we should all link together on this and try and just say, listen, we're all trying to head in the same direction. Can we just jump on the ship and get there first before let's not tear the ship apart before it even leaves shore.
I agree.
But I understand the criticisms of Corbyn because I criticised him during the Chris Williamson era. I interviewed Chris a lot as to what happened there. It was Zionism and Zionist forces that got him ousted from the Labour Party, and Jeremy threw him under the bus, and I criticised him for it.
Chris Williamson is a great person.
He's a
Uh,
great man.
I've got a massive admiration for that guy. What he went through was completely unjustified. He is anti-racist to the core of his being. He's a wonderful asset to our politics. He should be front and centre of any politics that is counter-hegemonic. I know he's joined up with George Galloway. I think that's a good fit for him. I think Galloway still has his place.
Me
Um,
too.
he's been absolutely staunch when it comes to Gaza and all things Palestine. But Jeremy, we're never going to change who Jeremy is, Gordon.
No.
He's not built for leadership. He became the accidental leader of the Labour Party. You'll know this. He's too passive. I don't think he's malevolent. I just think he just shies away from confrontation. But he should have stood on his side. And here's the thing that I am going to criticise him for this for. Don't forget, he's a 76-year-old man.
Yeah.
But regardless, we just had the 30th anniversary of 7/7 in July. And the usual encomiums, the dregs of the establishment, did their synthetic tributes. They went to that bullshit ceremony at St. Paul's. They were all there with their synthetic grief.
Mm-hmm.
But Jeremy put out a statement on X, as you would expect, and not one mention was made of Ken Livingstone. Ken Livingstone was the mayor of London. I remember I was actively involved. Ken Livingstone was phenomenal during that period of crisis, navigating London and the rest of the country through that horrible period.
He was also very good on Assange as well.
100%. And Ken Livingstone was supposed, I thought, to have been one of Jeremy's oldest comrades and friends. And if the fact that he did not mention Ken Livingstone, I found disgusting, I have to say. It was a betrayal. So I don't know if he's been advised by certain people who've been named and shamed by various, I don't want to go into names because it's not the place to do that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People around Jeremy that are giving him bad advice. I don't know. But Jeremy has to take responsibility. That was a studied insult of Ken Livingstone, who I believe is in very poor health right now. So I found that utterly, utterly unconscionable on the part of Jeremy. The problem we have, and if you look back at the Corbyn era when the Labour Party, all the political pressure that Jeremy came under was from the right, not the left. Mm. If you were on the left and you criticised Jeremy, you were seen to be a traitor and an outlier. And that was a big mistake. Now he's getting a lot of criticism from the left. I think some of it is undeserved.
Yeah, me too.
I think there needs to be more nuance. I think the party's not even been established yet. But my cynical self says that it's not going to be successful. Here's why. If you're having a conference to come up with a name for a new political party, you've got problems. I mean, they're actually now, it's almost like ultra democracy leads to paralysis. Lead.
Yeah.
You know, why? It's all this navel gazing. And when's the conference now? I don't know. It's November. It's being pushed back again and again. Meanwhile, kids are being slaughtered in Gaza. I just think that you know, I look at Palestine Action. I look at Kneecap, the rap band. I look at Bob Villan. Let 100 Flowers Bloom. The wide, broad-based Stop the War movement and Palestine Solidarity. How's its place?
Yeah.
Is it effective? I don't know. You tell me. Has it moved the dial? I don't think so. Palestine Action moved the dial.
Bob Villan moved the dial.
Kneecap moved the dial.
That's Corbyn's problem. It was always my biggest criticism of him that his greatest strength is his greatest weakness.
100%.
His greatest strength is he's a pacifist, and his greatest weakness is he won't throw a punch. And that is the big problem. And this is why people, like Chris right now, have a right to be wary of what's happening, because if you're it sounds like you're going to make the same mistakes again, the same
yeah.
mistakes that led you to losing to Boris Johnson.
Well, let me put in a broader context. Is the average man and woman riding or travelling on the Clapham omnibus worried about or fixated on Jeremy's position on Zionism? No,
and that's something.
But that's where I come in, where I say, come on,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We have to understand there are other issues that people are concerned about on the doorstep: child poverty, the NHS waiting times, housing crisis, homelessness, maldistribution of wealth. We know all the issues, and Jeremy is leading a party. And he can't afford in this regard to get bogged down. His actions have been exemplary in terms of he's never wavered in his support for the Palestinians. He hasn't.
Right.
Does he still support a two-state solution? Yes, that's a problem. But that can be dealt with in the context of a fluid narrative conversation within the context
exactly. The one thing Corbyn is, he's democratic. And if the party democratically says we need to do this, he'll go along with it. That's why he took so much grief on Brexit. That's exactly the stance he took.
Yes. There's no argument now.
This is why there's part of me that's like, why don't you just jump on the ship and argue about this when you get to the destination,
There you go.
But I totally understand why people have got their reservations for him. But I also think he's the best vehicle that we've got at the moment. Yes.
And I do like Zara Sultana. I think she's very brave. I don't agree with her on everything, but I don't have to agree with her on everything. but I do. She's in it for the right reasons. She's a strong voice for social economic justice, and she's great on Palestine. So I think sometimes on the left we focus too much on the things we don't agree on rather than the things that we agree on.
This is what the right why the right win all the time. In
Because
a way,
they do that. They do
you know,
exactly.
the left talk about solidarity a lot, but it's actually the right. When the right wants something,
They
when
practice it.
they will look at you in the dead in the eye and tell you black is white because they know it's going to get them to where they're going. And they all get on message. They really do, all of them. And I
And,
just wish
sorry to interrupt because I'm so animated by this because you've touched on something that really touches a nerve with me. I think subconsciously the left is actually scared of achieving power. You know, if you think back to 2017, that snap election, Jeremy's performed the performance when the manifesto was leaked 4 weeks in advance. I know that Seamus Milne, an act of genius, leaked it. That changed everything. Suddenly we were thinking, wow, we can have a different world. We can have public ownership of railways. We can have a state investment bank. We can have a state-owned pharmaceutical company. We can have, a higher living wage, etc. We can tax the billionaires, and that changed everything. And he came within 2,400,
so close.
even though he was dealing with a treacherous PLP, stabbing him in the back at the
And
same time.
from nowhere as well, in like three
Yes,
months, from nowhere. He was like 17, 20 points behind or something like
yes.
that.
That's why Theresa May called it. She thought, I'm just going to destroy him now because the polling numbers there was such a wide chasm. But after that performance, Jeremy had the moral political capital to shape the Labour Party in his own
Yeah,
image. And this was when on the table was a motion to bring in mandatory reselection.
I
And who
remember.
scuppered that? John McDonnell.
Was it really?
John McDonnell said, no, this is a time to reach across the aisle and shake their hands. Madness. That's the left. We're not, what's the word, ruthless enough when
Right.
your politics, as you know, is a matter of life and death. And the thing that scares the left is being called Stalinist. And this is
Well,
where this ultra democracy becomes a problem because you can't shake hands with a snake, and this is where huge mistakes were made. Um, Maybe for right-meaning reasons, I don't know. But John McDonnell was the one who said, no, no, don't do that. It's a step too far. There'll be a split, etc., etc. That was madness looking back.
John
They should,
McDonnell, who's still in the Labour Party.
yes.
I,
They,
I can't I can't get my head around good people who are still in the Labour Party. If you're still in there, I can't. Yeah, I mean, surely there must have been a point during the last
it's a lost
five
cause.
years, right?
Cause.
Surely there must have been a point in the last 5 years where you would have just, I quit this. I can't deal with this anymore.
Well, this is where I have a lot of sympathy for us. This is where I struggle to comprehend the thinking of Diane Abbott, Clive Lewis, soft left members of the party, even Don Butler, who've suffered at the hands of the PLP, the right wing Starmanite, Blairite PLP. Why are they still in it? Is it because they have no imagination to think that something else can come out of it? Maybe they think that third parties, understandably within British political history, have never succeeded. I wish Jeremy had come out of it earlier.
Yeah, me too.
You know, I think he should have come out of it earlier. I don't know what's going on between him and Zara. There's talk of a schism or direction of travel, but he needs to get this thing up and running as soon as possible. The
You
time is now.
mentioned you mentioned the Zionism thing. I just want to circle back to it and how it's not high on people's agenda in this country. It's just not. If you look at really what people, if I went and knocked on 100 doors on my council estate and said, "What's the number one issue for you?" It'd be the cost of living. It would be, the NHS. It would be rising inflation. It would be all of these things. It would be education, healthcare. It would be all the normal things. Zionism wouldn't even crack the top 10.
Yeah.
And if I went to try and speak to my mom about Zionism, she wouldn't have a clue what I am talking about. She really wouldn't. And obviously, there's that aspect of it that we have to look at as well. In that, if Jeremy was to come out, and say I'm an anti-Zionist, whatever that means. He would have to qualify what that means, and it would give the powers that be a big stick to hit him with over the anti-Semitism angle all over
He
again.
wouldn't be allowed to talk about anything else, Gordon. He
It would
would not
suck
be.
all
He
in
would get
up.
bogged down in that. Yeah. And so this is not, to me, this is not an act of what's a betrayal. I'm an anti-Zionist to the my marrow, so are
Me
you.
too.
But the problem I have with the pro-Palestine movement is it's a class issue. It has to be made relevant to every issue that you've just mentioned on the doorstep. And here's where I preonate the great Malcolm X. He said, you can't understand what's going on in Mississippi if you don't understand what's going on in the Congo. So a politics that allows children in council estates up and down the UK to be deprived of the necessities of life is the same politics that can ride shotgun for the genocide of children in Gaza. There's a circular relationship. A foreign policy of war, proxy or direct war, and genocide, as we are now living through, rests on foundations of social and economic injustice at home. Yeah. So you can't understand what's going on in Gaza if you don't understand what's going on in Easterhouse in Glasgow, Muirhouse in Edinburgh, Brixton in London, etc., Toxteth in Liverpool. Yeah. So this is where it has to be made. There has to be a material analysis because I think too much of the pro-Palestine movement is fueled by moral outrage. Entirely understandable and justifiable, but it's a class issue. Everything comes down to class, both when it comes to geopolitics and when it comes to domestic politics. And this is where the attention should be, not whether Jeremy is an anti-Zionist or not. This is why it's a misguided attempt to put him in, box him in. That's why I defended him on this. He can't afford the luxury of these maximalist positions, but you judge him by his actions.
I find myself agreeing with people I don't normally agree with on this issue. Not that I don't normally agree with you. I'm talking about other people that
Yeah.
I really do think are not great people, and I end up agreeing with them because they've got a point when they say that this is being weaponized.
100%, mate. 100%. Are you going to join your party? Are you going to join? Are you going to?
I've
Are you having a watching brief to see how it goes, or what's your stance on it?
I've come out and I've said, yeah, I mean, I might even, we'll see. I've
Are you going to
kind
go
of
to the
lost.
conference, the opening conference? You think?
I might do. I might do just, but purely in like a journalist aspect. I've never joined a political party. I voted Workers' Party last two elections. I think I'll probably end up voting your party this time round. But I think there's a I haven't got I'm not fulfilled with high hopes the same as you, John. I feel that there's too much infighting already.
Yes.
And I feel that unless the left can learn to just get along and understand that, listen, we agree on 98% of the shit that we talk about. And the 98% that we agree on, by the way, it's
Yes.
those top 10 that if you were to ask all the households around in this area, what do you care about? And you're not going to get there if you let the 5% that you disagree on tear you apart.
Yes. It's a story of the left in the UK. I was a member of the Scottish Socialist Party, which is a wonderful organisation which did much to change our politics in Scotland. Had 6 MSPs in Holyrood at one time, way ahead of its time in terms of policies on childcare, on women's liberation, on drugs, etc., etc. And I was talking to an old comrade from those days just yesterday, actually, and I said, we came too soon. We came too soon. And what has been lost? I mean, my brilliant conferences, street stalls every weekend. I was going to 4 or 5 organising meetings a week. I mean, it was the most consequential period of my life, intellectually enlivening, ideologically fulfilling, fructifying, etc. We do need a strong left, mate, because as we said earlier, the right is currently on the march in a way that hasn't been since the 1930s, and it's frightening to behold.
Well, there was a flicker of good that happened yesterday with this. I don't know much about him, but this Zach Polansky guy who won the Green vote,
Yeah, by quite a wide margin, I believe. Yeah,
by a massive margin. Yeah, he got like 3 times the votes or 4 times the votes of anybody else, right?
right.
So, and some of the stuff that he's been saying has been very popular. So, we'll
Yeah.
see. There's a flicker of hope on the horizon. I hope that this Your Party is going to be successful, but the start has not been the best,
No.
and I don't like the fact that they're proving what was his name, Paul Mason, to be right. I
Oh,
don't like that. I really don't. You're proving him right, guys. Don't stop it.
all right, my friend. Lovely chatting as always. Let's keep this going. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
absolutely. We'll schedule it every now and then. I really enjoy my conversations. John, where can people find you, John? John?
John Wight one on X. My medium page is John Wight Medium. I've got books out. I've got a new book coming out actually this month. Jungle Days supporting Celtic in the 1980s. It's obviously, as the name suggests, it's the Glasgow Celtic Football Club, but it's more a political and social history of that consequential, impactful decade. So
Well,
you'll be able to get it.
I've got your book, This Boxing Game, is it?
Yeah, well, this
Uh,
book coming up has been
What?
published by the same publisher, um,
Excellent.
and I've got a novel that I'm very keen to promote. It's been very well received, up to including an Egyptian academic wanting to do a paper on it. Gaza, this bleeding land. It's a depiction of Gaza in a fictional setting, told from the perspective of two rival combatants in advance of the 2014 Israeli ground operation there, and Operation Protective Edge. You may remember it in July of that year, and it goes back and forth to understand the different arguments. Obviously, I'm pro-Palestinian, as you know, but I tell the story from both competing narratives on that struggle, prolonged struggle and tragedy of world historical importance. Again, you can get that book from anywhere you get your books.
I'll look forward to reading that. John White, thank you very much,
All right,
sir.
brother. Take care.